It's a draft that SRS has provided to us, and we'll get into some more details of what it actually includes. Is this on? Okay, thank you. So I've already told you our purpose. This just shows you some of our facilities and nuclear materials. We are responsible for H area, L area, K area, and 235F. And this is another example. This is your cab drawing just to show those facilities as well and how they interreact. And I'm getting over a cold, so I'm sorry about my voice. So the system plan consists of 2 volumes. One is dedicated to uranium, spent fuel, and heavy water, which is what we have stored that's left over from production days, and it's what our reactors used as moderator. And heavy water just means that it has deuterium in it, which is an isotope of hydrogen. So normally you learn in water is H2O. Heavy water just has deuterium in it, which means it has another, let me get my chemistry right, another atom in the nucleus, or another, thank you. So. And volume 2 is dedicated to plutonium. We have surplus plutonium that we're responsible for in K area mostly. And so that's what volume 2 is dedicated to. This just shows you that's storage of plutonium, and this shows you storage of spent nuclear fuel in L area. So basically what it does, it lays out our program and what our goals are. So we have to continue to store the material safely and make sure that we don't impact the environment or workers. So that's our number 1 thing, is to be environmentally sound with anything that we do regarding disposition or storage of this material. We need to recover and downblend uranium. That's what we're currently doing with the AROD amount, the amended record of decision, which allows us to process up to 1,000 bundles of MTR fuel, material test reactor fuel, and up to 200 cores from the high flux isotope reactor out of Oak Ridge. And then all of that uranium is then downblended to a low enriched uranium, and that's shipped off to a fuel fabricator so they can use it for TVA reactors and make electricity out of it. So it's a big recycling plant that we do for uranium. We also need to maintain adequate storage, so in case there is any material that department deems needs to be stored at Savannah River site, we have that capability. So that's another goal that we have. We need to actually get rid of all this material at some point. So our goal that we have is to de-inventory L area completely. So that means get rid of all of our spent nuclear fuel and disposition it in a manner that's appropriate. And then because we want to be good partners with our liquid waste folks, right now we have a certain amount of liquid waste that we can send to them, and it's 300,000 gallons a year. We haven't reached that goal in many years, but that's our level of how much we can actually send over. So we want to maintain that as low as possible while still getting the mission done. And then we always want to reduce the costs of continuing operations in anything that we do. So the plan also identifies what are our risks. And I know you've heard this. I hate to be a broken record, but we have very old facilities that are aging. They require infrastructure to keep them up to date. We also have an aging workforce, and we have to have some very highly skilled and trained individuals to run our canyons and do our disposition of fuel and do the disposition of plutonium. It takes a lot of time to get those folks trained, qualified, and cleared so they have clearances and security clearances that allow them to do this work. And then always is funding. Funding is always a risk for us of what level of funding are we going to get this year. So basically, the system plan documents our inputs and assumptions of what we're using for our program. So it kind of gives a framework or a roadmap of the program and what has to be done. So it also, the biggest thing that it's going to do, and it's not just a paper document, this is a computer model. So it allows us to run scenarios. And these are strategic scenarios of if you've got X number of people, what more could you do? If you got X number of money, it lets you run those kind of scenarios to see what would happen. So now with any computer model, you still have to have the people go in and validate that what the model is spitting out is correct. But it allows you to go through those analysis and scenarios a little bit quicker. and in a consistent manner. If you were just doing it by people, I may have different assumptions than what Alan used or so-and-so used. So this way, all the assumptions are consistent, so you get consistent answers. What did I forget? So we basically have 3 scenarios that are documented in the plan that's draft right now. The department hasn't approved this plan. But one is a min-safe condition, which is where we don't make progress, but we keep everything safe. Another scenario is essential operations. And that's basically what we're doing right now with our spent fuel. And that's processing the 1,000 metric ton or 1,000 bundles and the 200 heifer cores. Doesn't do anything else, it's just that amount. And then we call the last one our full ops. If we were to actually disposition everything that we needed to, that's our full ops scenario. So, and this is just a picture of what it costs over the life cycle. So your blue line, this is your min-safe ops. So this is, you're really not getting rid of any material or dispositioning any material. You're just keeping everything safe. And you see, as you go out, those costs continue to go up each year because we've got to pay for escalation and you got to pay for pension. So you're basically just adding to those costs without doing anything with the material. In the full ops case, which is the green line, you see you pay more up here because you're actually dispositioning the material, but your costs go down in the out years because you've already dispositioned it. And so down out here, you're waiting for it to go into D&D and actually be turned over to that program. That's the facilities themselves. And then the essential ops is what we're doing. You see it, you have to pay more out here, but you do have to, eventually, you're going to follow the same as the min-safe because you haven't dispositioned all of the material under that essential operations scenario. So in summary, the system plan provides a more detailed look at the life cycle program for nuclear materials and what's required for its execution. It provides a set of standard assumptions, which helps in evaluating scenarios and making sure your evaluations are the same. And it gives us a management tool so that we can look at scenarios, and when we get asked from headquarters, if we did this to your program, what would that mean? So we can give them a real-time, this is what it does today, but this is what it does to you in your life cycle look. With that, any questions?
It's like y'all are racing. Both of them went up at the same time. Let's start with Joyce and then go to Dawn, and then we'll come over here. She went first all day yesterday.
Joyce, Underwood, Cab. I just have one question about your graphic here.
Mm-hmm. Yes.
So the green line, it kind of flatlines, but it doesn't. Why does it not flatline? It kind of creeps back up.
So this is going to, oops, sorry, I pushed the wrong thing. It's going to have to do with escalation in the out years. Every year your money is worth less and less.
So like inflation?
Inflation, yes.
Okay,
ma'am.
okay. I see. Thank you. That's all.
Mm-hmm.
Dawn Gillis, Cab.
Yes.
When do we get to actually see the system plan?
So we are working for, right now it's under review by our headquarters mission unit. It's under review by the site DOE folks as well as we've had NNSA looking at it. I would think we would not probably have approval till sometime in February. So release to the public is going to be difficult because of some of the things that are in the volumes that are pre-decisional. So we could get redacted copies, I would think, in the March timeframe.
And that would include seeing all the assumptions?
Yes, the assumptions and all are written out in the document.
Like
the only thing you're not going to
storage?
see is the actual computer model that does the algorithms and calculations.
Okay. All right. Thank you.
Okay. Mr. Malik?
Narendra Malik, Cab. I have a twofold question. You talked about heavy water. I thought it was going to be shipped to India and Canada. Is still at the site, and does Price Anderson applies to that?
So we have over 500,000 gallons of heavy water still at the site. At one point, we worked with the Canadians because the Canadians still use the CANDU reactors, which uses the heavy water as a moderator. The problem with our water is we have tritium levels in it, so it's contaminated. It's not pure heavy water. So The Canadians are on and off with wanting us to send the material to them. Right now they have plenty of heavy water, so I don't think that's going to be an option for us. What we are doing, because the tritium half-life is so small, it's 12 point something years, that we are storing it, so our storage is actually a potential helps us in disposition in the future. So we've already made it through one half-life. We're working on the second.
Price-Anderson?
The Price-Anderson, it is under nuclear materials, so if anything were to go wrong or be done incorrectly by the contractor, it would fall under the Price-Anderson Act.
Okay. Doug?
Doug Howard, CAB. Great presentation. I do have a couple of questions, though. The down-blended enriched uranium that you send off to Tennessee Valley Authority, do you send any of that off anywhere else other than that location?
Right now, we have a contract with TVA, so they get all of the uranium that's been down-blended to low enrichment, so it's below a 5% level, enrichment level that gets sent. We don't have a contract with anybody else. There are options for additional supply at a higher level that the department is looking at for some of the research reactors. They need a little bit higher enrichment. So those things are just now being looked at, but there's no decision been made on those.
Okay, and the final question I have, the various scenarios that you talked to us about, when you all get the congressmen and the folks up there in D.C., are they briefed on these scenarios also?
Yes, sir. They understand what we're doing. We brief our OMB, Office of Management and Budget examiner all the time, so he's aware of this. Unfortunately, the way I think, and this is personal, this is not coming from a department employee, our government is focused on a year at a time and not life cycle. And that's why a lot of things, it doesn't matter what you're going to save in the life cycle, it's how much can we afford today.
Thank you.
I think, yeah, Susan or Dawn?
Yeah, I just had Dawn Gillis, CAB. On the heavy water, it's gone through more than one half-life, because I was there 12 years ago, and it was, I think the latest, but didn't the last time it was any irradiation was when K restart was happening back in the early 90s? So it's been through at least 2 half-lives. So tritium should be getting pretty low in that.
It is. So we have to monitor that, and we have to do our material control and accountability audits on that all the time. So that's the decay of it is tracked by our engineers, and we can pull that up anytime we need to. I just stay on the safe side of saying it's at least done one.
Susan? No?
She answered my question.
She did?
She answered
Okay.
my question.
Anything else for Maxine?
Thank you.
Thank you. All right, she went fast. Cool. So let's bring John Lopez up. He's going to cover the integrated priority list for you guys.
Thank you, James. John Lopez, Department of Energy, Director of Integration and Planning. And before I get on with my presentation, I just want to thank Bob Doerr again for all your service to the CAB, and I've really enjoyed working with you over the past few years and the collaboration and the good discussions that we've had regarding the budget. So thank you, and you will be missed. So.
Thank you, John.
All right, so I'm here to talk about the integrated priority list. We are getting into the spring of 2018. We always work 2 years ahead, so this spring we are going to start working on our 2020 budget. Now, it's kind of hard to talk about when we don't only have a 2018 budget, but we are going to start planning for 2020. So why am I here? So I want to give you a better understanding on how we put together our budgets for the site. I want to request, as we do every year, your input to DOE on what your priorities are for fiscal year 2020. Every year we come to you and we ask you what your priorities are for the budget year. We also ask DHEC and EPA for their input as well, and they send us a letter outlining their priorities. Fortunately, you guys and our regulators are pretty much on the same page. You all have the #1 priority is our liquid waste program here on site, so that's a good thing. And then lastly, I'm here to fulfill a strategic and legacy management commitment to present this process to the CAB and request your input. DOE, Principal Deputy Secretary Environmental Management, also requires the site, Jack Craig, to go out to the regulators to request your input on our, when we prepare our budgets. When we submit our budget proposal to headquarters, Jack will also present what he has received from the regulators on what your priorities are for our budget year, and those that will be communicated to our senior management on both the CAB and our regulators for priorities. As we talked about before, we get our money in buckets here at the site. We have very little flexibility to move money around between those buckets. So for fiscal year 2020, OMB will give DOE a target to budget for fiscal year 2020. Those targets are then broken out by the field offices and then by PBS. When we are preparing our budget, and as we're preparing our accomplishments and what we can and can't do, we do have some flexibility at the site to present to our senior management on moving money around between those buckets on where we think that we could best utilize those dollars. So during our budget process, as we get our target, we get it by PBS, but then when we prepare our submittal to headquarters, we may or may not move some of that money around between those PBSs for consideration at headquarters. As we're developing our priorities for each PBS, those priorities are grouped into 4 main categories. The first one there supports safe operations and site services. You've heard the word MnSafe. That's really what that is. Those are the MnSafe activities that we're required to fund before we start making progress scope. We have operational support, cleanup activities to support regulatory milestones, and then lastly our making progress activities. So going through each one of these, the first one, like I said, is those activities to maintain facilities or systems in a state of operational readiness, including site safeguard and security. Our whole safeguard and security budget is considered MnSafe. Each PBS then has a MnSafe component to it. We have operational support activities. Those are our non-regulatory priorities that we are contractually required to fill. PILT's not listed there, but PILT is one of those. Our commitments that we've made to the regulators, EPA and DHEC, we give them grants each year to help fund their personnel to do oversight of the staff of the site. Then also our infrastructure activities are also included as part of operational support. Then we have our cleanup activities to meet our regulatory commitments. There's really 3 PBSs that this falls under. PBS 13, which is our solid waste PBS. We have a requirement as we generate waste on site. As soon as we generate that waste, there's a 1-year window, 1-year clock on when we have to disposition that waste. So we're required by regulatory laws that we have to get rid of that waste within 1 year. PBS 14, liquid waste. That's cleaning out our tanks, grouting the tanks, creating glass logs. There are regulatory commitments associated with our liquid waste program, so we have regulatory commitments for PBS 14. And then the last one is our soil and water PBS. Our DASH project, right now we have regulatory milestones to meet for the remediation of the DASH project, but then we also have probably, I don't know, hundreds of milestones that we do throughout the year for all of our pump and treat and soil remediation that's going on an ongoing basis. There's several commitments, cleanup plans that have to be done in order to meet those regulatory commitments. So PBS 30 falls underneath the regulatory activity. And last but not least, the money that we have left over after we fund everything else is used for making progress. Dispositioning spent fuel in H Canyon. There may be some additional work if we had leftover money that we would do for D&D that's not under a regulatory milestone, we would do that. Then any maintenance and deactivation activities like 235F. There's no regulatory requirements for doing that, but we're deactivating 235S as a making progress activity. So as I talked about before, we get our money down at the site in buckets. In fiscal year 17, we propose combining PBS 12 and PBS 11. Those are our two nuclear materials PBSs. Congress did not approve that for 17, so we're making another run at it for 18, where we want to combine those two PBSs. So once Congress passes a spending bill for 18, we'll find out whether or not they've allowed us to combine those two PBSs. One thing that's missing from here, in fiscal year 17, we had a PBS 202. PBS 202 was for infrastructure. Congress did not want us to create a new PBS for funding any of our infrastructure. In DOE, we thought that would be a good idea because it would bring more visibility to our infrastructure projects. Congress did not agree with that, and they told us if we have an infrastructure project that we need to do for a particular PBS, they want that to be included in that funding for that PBS. So if our nuclear materials has an infrastructure project they want to do, they need to fund it under here instead of this new PBS. One PBS that's not listed here is cybersecurity. In fiscal year 18, we created a new PBS, PBS 25, for cybersecurity. Everybody knows what's going on with cybersecurity across the world, okay? And in order to be able to bring more visibility to the cybersecurity program, we created a new PBS. Right now, cybersecurity is paid for out of our indirect costs. So in all previous fiscal years, it goes to an indirect, and then it's spread out, it's prorated among all these PBSs. Starting in 18, we created this separate PBS as a separate funding source to bring greater visibility to cybersecurity. Now, it's not listed here because with our conversations with Congress and an OMB, we believe that that's going to be funded as part of our Safeguard and Securities PBS. They said, yeah, we agree that it should be a separate funding source, but why create a separate PBS for it? We think it should be part of PBS 20. So hopefully, when a fiscal year 18 spending bill is passed, those cybersecurity dollars will be included as part of PBS 20. In addition to that, there's probably about $11 million in new scope. We have a lot of new requirements for cybersecurity, things that we haven't done in the past that we are required to do by law now. So our actual cybersecurity budget has gone up dramatically over what it was in previous years. So hopefully they fund it at a level we requested it, and hopefully they stick it all right here in PBS 20. So that's a kind of a change from where we were from fiscal year 17 to fiscal year 18. So where are we now? We all know where we are with fiscal year 18. You all seen the news. We've got a temporary spending bill through February 8th, so we got another little over 2 weeks of funding to come to the site. Fiscal year 19, we have submitted our 19 budget to headquarters. There's been a lot of discussion between the site and headquarters on what our fiscal year 19 budget is. We don't know what the final numbers are. We'll know at the same time you guys do when the president releases his budget in February. So here we are for getting ready for fiscal year 20, and that's really the purpose of why I'm here today, is to request your input for our fiscal year 20 baseline, or 20 budget. Acronyms, questions. So before you go on that, let me talk about a couple challenges we have going forward for fiscal year 20. Infrastructure, as you all know, infrastructure is crumbling at the site. We're constantly fighting for more infrastructure dollars. We all know what's going on. We had a great presentation on liquid waste this morning to talk about their system. We all know SWPF is going to be coming online here. And what happens with SWPF comes online, we're going to be producing a lot more salt. So in the past, we would build SDUs, salt disposal units, one at a time. We need to start building SDUs in order to keep up with the 9 million gallons of salt that's going to be produced a year for the SWPF. We need to be producing saltstone disposal units 2 at a time from now all the way until they're all constructed. So we're looking at from fiscal year 17 or 18 when we had SDU 7 being constructed. 19 and 20, we're going to be constructing SDU 7 and SDUs 8 and 9. 8 and 9 is one project, so really only be 8. And then lastly, our biggest challenge, and you guys have a special committee on this, is pensions. So let's talk a little bit about pensions. Pensions for the site in fiscal year 18, $125 million. 19, $201 million. So that's a $76 million increase from fiscal year 18. 2020, we go to $246 million, which is a $121 million increase over our fiscal year 18 level. So that's loss of buying power. Pensions are paid for all PBSs. We go up $121 million over our 18 levels without additional funding. That's loss in buying power to the site. So infrastructure, additional SDU construction, pension increases, those are three major challenges that we have ahead of us for fiscal year 20. So.
We're first, I think.
Bob Doerr, Cab. Got the turn in? Bob Doerr, Cab. John, I want to thank you once again because you do this on an annual basis in helping, you present the budget information to us for the SRS Cab, or excuse me, just for SRS DOE. And, and it's very important that the integrated priority list that the CAB signs off on, it'll be signed by Gil Allsworth as the new chair. And Gil, you've been participating in the Strategic and Legacy Management Committee in the past, so you know what this is all about. And arguably this IPL letter that goes to headquarters, DOE headquarters, is as important as any recommendation that's made throughout the year. That's my personal feeling. John, I got a question though. You provided us with a document that shows IPL by fiscal year, and I, for one, I've never seen this before. This is an excellent document, by the way. I want to compliment you on this. Going back to fiscal year 2017, David Hoyle was one who presented to the CAB about, the IPL letters that were being generated by the CAB in the past. They identified PBSs and put them on a priority order. And then David, for one, started asking, well, there's activities within the PBSs. And what, correct me if I'm wrong, but what you have here under each PBS are in fact the, you call it description of element, but it's in fact the activities of each PBS, what's being done. And then it's, what's really neat here is you've listed it by the category of how it's budgeted for. Is that fair to say?
Yes, that's correct.
So when David Hoyle got into this 2 years ago, and this CAB got into this, we all understood what he was, once he explained it to us, where he was coming from, was that, when you put together an IPL letter to DOE, that, obviously you're going to organize the priorities by PBS, but you can also go within the PBS that as you prioritize and look at the activities and say, we don't agree that that should just be minimum safe. We don't agree that just operational support is enough. We want milestones to be met or exceeded. When it comes to retiring tanks as an example. So I'm just, I'm getting off the board, obviously, but I think the ones who are still here, as you carry on and work on this IPL, that the opportunity here is to take this document that John's given us and understand the activities, and then you can really write a very comprehensive integrated priority list letter to DOE that supports the things that the CAB thinks are most important to the community and to the state of South Carolina. And I notice here pension and post-retirement benefits. This is what, like Tom French and the committee that he got started with pension benefits. you know, it's not as, pension benefits are not a separate PBS. They're integrated within all the PBSs because the contractors are responsible to meet the pension expense, and then DOE reimburses the contractor. So that's listed as MinSave, which I guess for lack of any other category. But you know, when you do this, I'm just suggesting when you do this IPL letter that you could make some comment to DOE headquarters about, well, look, they have this ramped up pension benefits, and that's going to affect, you know, the opportunity to do tank closures and meet milestones in other parts of the budget. So, you know, I'm just making some comments here. It's not really a question, John, but if I didn't quite make the points correctly, feel free to correct me.
No, those are great points. And the list you're looking at is the exact list that we as a site use when we're presenting our budget to headquarters. So what's missing from that list is the dollar value for each one of those. Headquarters doesn't like us sharing that, so that's kind of internal to the department as we're developing our budget. So, but actually that's OMB. It's not really the department. It's OMB that didn't want us to share that. But in addition to that, we also have IPL. Those are the in-target. That's what we've been able to fund within the target we receive. We also have an IPL list of over-target scope that's not funded. And when we present our budget to, when Jack's presenting his budget to his boss, he's got a red-blue sheet. Everything in blue is funded, everything in red is unfunded. But it's these items that show up on that red-blue sheet as funded and not funded. So you're looking at the same list that we look at every year when we prepare our budget.
Don Gillis cab. Can we see the red sheet, blue sheet?
No,
What's funded, not how it's funded, but where that red line is and whatever's below the list is not getting funded.
That's one of the things that when we originally prepared last year's presentation, we had a cutoff line, and OMB said, no, we're only allowed to show them.
That's the important stuff for us to know what's not being funded.
I understand.
So yeah, what's above the target and what's below the target. That's really important. I mean, otherwise it's, we see these lists here of all the different activities, but is the activity funded in this year's budget or not? That's kind of important for us to know. So given that was one of my questions was, okay, now let's put this in the order of which ones are being funded and where the line is. So anyway, still want to see that. So a couple other questions. What is included in, quote, DOE managed? Everyone has that.
Yeah, things in DOE managed, like we have a support services contractor on site, and so every PBS pays for that, so it's kind of a site-wide assessment tax. So that's included in there. PBS 11C, they give money to Los Alamos to do some work for them. That's a DOE managed subcontract that goes directly from DOE to DOE, so that would be in there.
But that's a different line on here. That's already on on here. But anyway.
But it's really any direct DOE contracts that we have.
Okay. All right, then.
Like SREL, the funding that goes to SREL, that would be under PBS 13, and that would be a DOE under the DOE managed line.
Okay. PBS 41. That's got F 235F and F area surveillance. Who owns that? Which organization owns that? So they still own that. So that was just pulled out of PBS 11C and made its own little. But you still have that, okay? And then the lists you gave us have 16, 17, 18, and we're going to be looking at 20 after February. What about 19?
After the president releases his budget in February, I'll be able to share with you.
That's 2020.
No.
Oh.
The budget that comes out in February will be the 19 budget.
Okay. But you're asking us for comment on the 2020 IPL?
That's correct, because in March and April is when we start preparing our 2020. So the president releases his budget for 19 in February, then we start planning for 2020.
That's right. I knew that. I just forgot. Thanks for
So after
me.
February, I'll be able to share with you that IPL list for 20, for 19, I mean.
Okay, I think that's it. Thanks.
Jim Lyon. I have several issues here. Not really issues. I want to clarify for my own benefit. Your IPLs are a direct reflection of DOE's IPLs, are they not? And when they are putting together their budget, they look at the entirety of DOE's operations, such as Savannah River, and then they know they have 16 or 8 or 9 or 11, I don't know how many entities to deal with. They get X amount of money, and they divide that in their budget guidance, they divide that amongst you and the others. So you're really competing with other entities in DOE for a finite amount of money, if you will, which may or may not last through the entire budget year. And then it seems to me that the IPLs are one thing, but management costs here must be kind of chopped up and distributed throughout these IPLs. In other words, your salary is, 5% from one IPL and 30% from another IPL. Is that a true statement?
No.
Or something to that effect? Or is there another IPL I don't see here?
You don't see that. The DOE salaries are paid for out of a fund called Program Direction,
Okay.
and that's managed at the headquarters level. So there's not a separate PBS for DOE salaries. Our travel, training, and salaries all come out of Program
Okay,
Direction.
so that 3-week conference in Dubai, it doesn't come out of this. All right, the evaporator leak, which in our previous existence here, how long did that go on? There's a leak. It takes money to fix it, but in fact there's an evaluative period of time. And then once it's agreed that this is a problem, and then it's agreed that this is a viable fix, and DOE agrees to that, how long does it take to get the additional funds that aren't already in one of these IPLs? Or do they tell you to take it out of your current IPL for something else?
Yeah, without getting into the specifics, and I'll let Sonny talk to that, but there was no additional money giving to that PBS because of the evaporator leak. So what we've had to do is defer other planned scope in order to fix the evaporator.
So in other words, you had to make adjustments to your operation overall.
That is
But
correct.
did you make adjustments in just one IPL or across the board or several IPLs?
It would have been in 14C, in PBS 14C. So we would have made adjustments. There's several priorities within 14C. We would have reprioritized the scope within 14C. We don't have the ability to move scope from one PBS to another without going through OMB.
Yeah, so that was a big chunk of change, wasn't it?
That is correct.
All right, thank you.
Oh, did someone want to? Oh, okay. Nina Spinelli, CAB. My question's pretty quick. About the salt waste that will be coming up and moving from doing one SDU a year to potentially 2. Will there be a cost savings by doing 2 of them at one time versus just 1?
If you have the same contractor working on both SDUs, then there is a potential, but these things are competitively bid. So yeah, there could be a potential savings if you only have to mobilize one contractor versus another. The good news is our SDUs from here on out are pretty much cookie cutter. The design's done. We know what we're going to do. It's an off-the-shelf design that we can just go out on the street and start building. But will there be efficiencies with building 1 versus 2 at the same time? I'd say only if there's the same contractor working both.
Great, thank you.
John, thank you for the informative presentation. Couple questions. First on the FY18 CR. OMB allows you to request something called CR anomalies where you get some possibly not very often, some legislative relief. Did you all request any anomaly money during the CR period so far?
Yes, we have. We as a site requested them, but they didn't go they did not go forward from OMB to OMB.
And regarding this IPL list, OMB also, they have this standardized uniform construct object classification that I'm assuming that these IPLs will map to. Is that correct? And they have these broad categories, personnel compensation, supplies and material.
When we do our budget, it's not at that level. It's at a much higher level than that. Now, on the accounting side of things, there is a much lower level in accountability for how the costs are coming in. But when we're submitting our budget to OMB, it's at a very much higher level than labor, materials, subcontractors, those kind of things.
Is this these IPL line items, is this the lowest level of detail at which you budget?
For the most part, yes. Now, we do have a contractor baseline that's at a much lower level than that. But, so that's really our starting point. So when we're preparing our fiscal year 20 budget, our contractor has a very detailed baseline that we use as a starting point, and then that's rolled up to this IPL level.
Okay, thank you.
You're welcome.
Joyce, Underwood, CAB. My question is in reference to this IPL document so that I might understand it better. On the side where it says category and there's different distinctions, in the awful event that we have to go down to min-safe levels because of the pension that we discussed in the pension meeting, are all these things on the right-hand side going to go to min-safe, or how do these things work? I don't understand.
Well, the items that are listed as min-safe, what else? I don't think I have it on. The items that are listed at min-safe will be funded first.
Okay.
So those are really the first priority. We fund min-safe first, and then after that, we start funding the.
So they don't all become min-safe automatically?
No,
okay.
No. So some
So
of
they
our
are what they
some
are,
of our
they don't
making progress
change.
activities will just fall off the list because we won't have enough funding.
So as they're categorized, they don't change. That is what they are
that is
forever
correct.
and always.
Yes,
okay.
they don't change from an operational support to a min-safe or vice versa. If it's a min-safe, it's always min-safe.
Okay. Thank you.
Gil?
John, thank you. You know I love this, so I appreciate it. Gil Allens with CAB. We've talked about in the EM scope with pension funding committee about what min-safe really means. What stops? I mean, we can sit here and talk about it, but I mean, we talked about it in the last. I mean, we're talking SWPF doesn't come up online.
In liquid waste, you would not be cleaning out any more tanks.
So everything we talked about this morning.
You would not be producing glass logs, right? You would not be, producing salt. So yes.
In Maxine's area, what happened? I mean, would we just make sure everything is stable? The canyons get shut down.
The canyon would not be shut down. It would be maintained in a high state of readiness. So you would keep the minimum people you need in order to be able to keep H Canyon in a high state of readiness. But you would not be running any product through the facility. You would not be receiving any foreign fuels coming to the site. That would all cease.
Okay, but we wouldn't be processing it. We wouldn't be cleaning any. We would just make sure everything's okay.
That is correct.
And one of the things that stood out to me in that committee meeting, the layoffs would be massive, correct? We're talking about 1,000 jobs?
Well, depending on the magnitude and depending on how much funding you get, yeah. So if it's $125,000 per person here at the site, including salaries and benefits, you take the amount of increase in pension, and most of our costs here at the site are labor. So just do the math. So yes, it would be, when we talked worst case scenario. I think when the pensions were up at 300 million. 2020, we're not there yet. We're only at 246.
Right.
So when I was talking at that meeting, we were up at I think over 300 million. So that was the 1,000 people when we did the math.
So, I mean, okay, I mean, it's not good, but one of the things I really, for the cab, for us to understand is that things would cease, people would lose their jobs, and, you know, to put it into a, we're paying $125 million on FY18. We're looking at a 38% increase for next year, and then another 19% increase for the year after that. Imagine if you took a 40% pay cut. I mean, or, you know, on your, I mean, it's not quite that bad, I'm overstating, but I mean, imagine if your costs for something went up that high out of your paycheck, how that would affect you. That's what we're looking at for the site. So imagine a fixed cost in your life went up 38%. How would that affect you? So I mean, I just really want to hammer home the issue that what we're talking about here. It's easy to get lost in numbers and percentages and talk, but let's say you make $100,000 and next year you have a 38% increase. That's a big deal. So I mean, you're not going to have nearly as much spending power. You're not going to be able to do the things that you do, and that's what we're talking about here. Things are going to come to it. I mean, imagine your house. Things would come to a screeching halt. You wouldn't do the things that you normally do. That's what we're talking about.
If funding is flat from what we planned in 18, if it's flat all the way out, it's going to have dramatic impacts. So
thanks, John.
Hopefully we get additional funding.
All right. Mary.
Mary Weber, CAB. Thank you for this chart. It's extremely helpful. You know, we didn't have anything like this last year. But I'm just recalling last year, in terms of our timing, the committee that's charged with drafting the letter does not meet again till April. We do have a full board meeting in March, but I think that it'll be important for drafting the letter to see the 2019, which will come out sometime in February. But I'm just wondering, James, if you have any idea, Bob, if you can remember how we handled this last year, because we couldn't get we could draft the letter in committee in April or prior to that, but we wouldn't have a full board meeting to approve it until May. What did we do?
Last year you did all of your editing on day one of the full board, and you approved it the next day. You had... In
May?
No, in March. You did it all in March. You did the editing on the first day.
So would it be possible for the 2019 to be distributed at least to the committee members in February, so that in the meantime the committee, even if we exchanged emails or whatever, could try to get a draft letter together?
As soon as John releases it to us, we can release it to you so that you can begin considering that in your personal deliberations on which items you would want to rate higher in priority.
Yeah, as soon as the budget's released in February, we can give you the IPL for 19. That wouldn't be a problem.
Yeah,
Okay,
Mary, your
thank you.
question's very important because the timing is critical. You recognize the end of March is the deadline to get the letter done. So the only opportunity is to you take time in the March full board meeting to grind this out and get an IPL together that can be signed off on. So you're right.
Okay.
Yeah. Okay. Is this Larry or Doug over here?
This is
Doug?
No, Doug Howard Cab. Great briefing, presentation. The Min State scenarios that you all run, are they just done on paper, or do you actually do any type of actual, I guess, rehearsals of?
No, there's not anything physically that's done. You know, we don't take nuclear materials, do a min-safe exercise. It's really on paper. It's really, you know, Michael and his managers determining what resource levels they need in order to be able to keep H Canyon at a high state of readiness. So Max, I don't know if you want to add to that.
Just a little bit. So our documented safety analysis actually specify what our minimum staffing is and what minimum activities have to go on to stay safe. So it's already defined for us in that safety document.
Thank you.
But not all facilities have a DSA. So like in PBS 30, our soil and groundwater program, that would be the managers identifying which people they need in order to maintain the systems that we have going on out in the field right now for soil and water treatment. So
For liquid waste, it's the same thing. We determine how many people need to be in the process rooms, and for minimum to maintain that level of safety, the maintenance activities that need to continue. There's a lot of work that goes on under MinSafe, but we just don't make any progress in terms of removing waste and cleaning tanks or producing canisters, treating any waste. So that's the way it works.
And so all sites are working with the same definition. When we get our budget guidance each year, there's actually a definition of what MinSafe is. So each site determines what that is, looks at that definition, determines what that level is for their site.
Okay. Bob, did you have further?
Yes. Bob Doerr, Cab. I'd like to go back to a point that Gil Allensworth was just making a few minutes ago, which is, we have a ad hoc committee, this pension expense committee. Tom isn't here at the moment, but Tom was, in my opinion, was smart enough to, focus on this. And Gil was writing a recommendation about pension expense for the site and so forth, but it's led into this committee that Tom's heading up. But anyway, the last presentation, what I heard at our last pension committee meeting was that, we're getting into, if we're working on an IPL for 2020, that's starting one of the years where the pension expense really starts to ramp up. Is that correct, John?
That is correct.
And so starting in 2020 and going out to 2021, 2022, the expense keeps incrementing higher. Eventually it reaches a high water mark and then starts trending down. But if SRS is still working under like a CR, I'm not sure you're going to get extra money to pay for the pension expense. And when they were, what Gil was talking about with layoffs, I guess this is the only point I want to make, because this would really drive home the effect in the community of Aiken, is that not only would you be laying people off in years where you can't, you have to pay this increased pension expense, but the point I heard, which was once you lay people off, it's very time consuming to recruit. Once you get, the ability to hire back people to get back up to speed, so in the work plan, you can't find these people because now you've laid people off, right? Isn't that what we heard, Gil? Once you lay people off, it's going to be hard to replace them. To bring them back, bring new ones in and get them up to speed, have them be productive, right? So that security clearance, yeah. John,
depending on what area of the site they're laid off, if you're talking in the nuclear materials area, it's 2 to 3 years to hire somebody, get them qualified, get them a security clearance, give them their on-the-job training. 2 to 3 years before they're an operator is ready to start working. Now, if it's an accountant, that's somebody that's a little different. Not to disparage accountants, but it's a little easier to hire an accountant than it is a nuclear operator.
So, Dave.
Dave Vavakis, Cap. John, I'm sure you all have had discussions with the Office of Management and Budget and the Department of Energy Office of Budget on this pension crisis. What have their responses been?
Well, we've had several discussions with OMB, and Jack talks to his management all the time about the issues. And I think they're trying to make the case on why the Savannah River site needs additional funding. We'll find out in 19 whether or not they've heard us and we've made our message clear. They understand it's a problem. They understand that these are costs that we have to pay. But I think the first shot across the bow on whether our message has gotten through it will be next month when we get the February budget. Jack.
This is Jack Craig, Cap. So up to this point, in 17 and 18, our request reflected all that we needed for pension. So we, up to 18 anyway, we were covered in our request to fund all these. We're optimistic the 19 budget will be the same. And our request.
at our request. Yeah.
Important distinction. Bobby?
Bobby Williams, cab. SDU 6 was constructed $25 million under budget. Can you move that money from that PBS to the pension?
That is a great question, and we have proposed to Congress for fiscal year 18. There's actually some leftover money from SDU 6 and from SWPF construction. We are requesting Congress in our fiscal year 18 appropriation to move those dollars into the liquid waste program. So right now, SDU construction is a line item project, and Congress is the one that has to move those dollars. So we have sent that request to Congress, and they've given us an indication that it's either they fix it or we have to submit a formal reprogramming request. They've requested that let us fix it for you, and so hopefully when we get our 18 budget, they will have made that adjustment for us when they give us the budget for 18. Sonny,
and if you had to go to a men's safe, God forbid that we had to do a layoff, but you would lay off people that are non-essential personnel first.
Absolutely. Yes. Yes. I mean, if it's an operator it's a highly trained operator in the canyon, I can't lay that person off versus somebody else. It has to be somebody who's been trained, cleared in order to be able to do that job function.
Thank you.
Anybody else have any questions for John?
Thank you very much.
Thank you. All right, so we're back completely on track. We started a little bit late, but we're at 2:15. Do we need to take a break now, though? Can we plow it? All right, so let's go ahead and take a 10, okay? So up next on the agenda, we have the topics for considerations presentation. But before we launch into those, real quick, I'd like to just go ahead and get the committee chair voting out of the way, if no one has any objections. I'd like to give Eleanor and Delisa a little bit extra time to count those ballots, just to make sure that we dot all the I's, cross all the T's. So does anyone have any problems with moving this up on the agenda? Larry's fine with it. That's all I need. So I want to hand out the ballots. If I can get you to mark them with your choices. Actually, no. Before I hand these out, Bobby, you have an announcement to make before the ballots are handed out.
Bobby Williams, Cab. My name is down for nomination for Administrative and Outreach Chair. And I've spoken to Ms. Hobson, and I think the best thing for me to do is work under Ms. Hobson's leadership and learn from her, and I think she's been doing an outstanding job. And if she would continue, if you all would write her name in and scratch mine, will you accept, Ms. Hobson?
Good afternoon, everyone. Bobby, if you think so.
All right.
Yes, ma'am.
I will. And I guess I'm a little premature with this. However, I was thinking if Bobby would, since she is on that committee, would serve as vice, and that would place you in a learning situation.
Yes, ma'am.
All right.
Okay, then I'll accept under those
So,
conditions.
don't clap yet, because I need you to follow Bobby's advice and write in Eleanor's name on the ballot, okay? That's an official request from the person who is on the ballot to not check that box and to write in Eleanor's name, okay? If you get confused, Miss Eleanor can fill it out for you. No one do that, please. I got them on nice large sheets of paper this time. I got a few complaints. No, you got to do it yourself. So there's a question about the electronic voting on this. And this one we want to make sure that we maintain a paper count for the rest of the day at the very least so that we can make sure that we get everything correct. Nina, I've already got yours, right? Okay. So we will not be doing the electronic votes for this, although we will for all of our votes later in the day today. But as always, we keep elections on paper. Nina's staying for the clicky thing. You're not ready yet? I can come back to you. No rush. All right. Thank you. Yeah, I'm coming back for that. That's okay. We don't mind. Thank you, Bobby. And then one more. I don't want to touch it, really. It's not you, it's the ballots. Okay. So, Miss Eleanor, if you don't mind, you can step out with Delisa and y'all can go count these. Oh, did I? Yes, I did. I got his. Yeah. All right. And these extras, can tear them up. That way we know that they don't get used. Okay. So with that, can we move into the topics of consideration presentation now? All right. Just as a quick review, because I know that we have some folks who haven't done this with us yet, and I know that I mentioned it this morning, but I'm going to do it again anyway. The topics of consideration are those topics that DOE is putting forward for your 2018 work plan. These are the areas that they have identified where they want your recommendations and feedback on. It doesn't mean that this is the sole list. If you have ideas for things that need to be on the work plan, please let us know now if you need to. If you need to think about it, you can let us know later, let your chair know. But keep in mind that we need your ideas, your list of topics that you want included before the February 12th work plan meeting so that the chair and the point of contact can sit down and create the schedule for the remainder of the year. Are there any questions about that process? Everyone knows my phone number, so you can call me with your ideas? Yeah, you got it? Okay. Let's start with facilities disposition. Avery?
Thank you. Good afternoon. My name is Avery Hammett, and I am the DOE point of contact for the Facilities Disposition and Site Remediation Committee. And I am here today to provide you with a list of some potential topics for the 2018 Facilities Disposition and Site Remediation Committee work plan. First, we'll take a look at the list of completed topics from the 2017 work plan, and I won't read them all because you all can do that. And then on to the 2018 proposed topics. And as James just said, we have DOE proposed topics, and then there's a placeholder for CAB proposed topics. So get the wheels turning, come up with some ideas for us. For the DOE topics, we have the yearly SRS annual site environmental report, the SR report, which summarizes the year's data for environmental monitoring and sort of a status of the site from an environmental perspective. And as I'm sure most of you all remember, the team that works on that is very, very interested in getting feedback from the CAB, how to make that report more user-friendly, more readable. So again, they are soliciting input from you all for suggestions for improvements. The D Area Ash Project team came to me and asked me to include them on the work plan for this year because they would like to give a presentation getting everybody up to speed on the progress on the project, and also to provide an opportunity for the CAB to ask any questions in advance of the public comment period that will accompany the proposed plan in the fall. I think September is the date for that. So we'll fit that in sometime in the summer so that to give time for questions and stuff. Then we have 3 topics listed that are just to provide context of site activities, background information, and program updates. First, we have the Savannah River Ecology Lab update, which we all enjoyed this morning. And I spoke to Dr. Rhodes after his presentation, and he suggested that we add a separate presentation about their feral hog research, since there was a lot of interest in that from the CAB. So we'll work that one in too if you all are interested in that. Every year we get a oversight of cleanup activities presentation, one from EPA and one from DHEC. So we've included that. And then an update on the radionuclide education monitoring and outreach program, which is the REMOP program that Dr. Rhodes discussed this morning. They will be doing year 2 of work, and so it seems appropriate to get an update from them since that was an action that came out of this committee. And again, the CAB proposed topics, we have none identified yet, but we are open to suggestions. And the path forward from here is in February, next month, the committee chair and the DOE liaison for each committee sit down and do the work plan scoping session, and we finalize the list of topics. And then the Department of Energy will look at when it makes sense to schedule those topics based on work scope and timing and things. And so they'll come up with a schedule, and then the work plan is approved. And that's it. Any questions?
Before we move into questions, I just want to remind everybody that these are questions about the topics or ideas for topics, and not necessarily detailed questions about what they are. We're going to get to those through the presentations throughout the remainder of the year. Dawn's nodding. She's like, yep, I understand that. Let's move on. Okay. What you got, Dawn?
Dawn Gillis, CAB. The one thing that we talked about a little bit, Avery, was at one point was what else is going on besides DASH.
Okay.
And I don't know if it can be included in as one of these topics, or to have it as a separate topic, that there's a lot more going on in little bits, but a whole
Right.
bunch of things.
Right.
And making it a little more clear that, I don't know if that's a separate,
Yeah.
like I said, a separate presentation, but covering that, making sure it's clear.
We'll figure out the best way to get that presented. Any other?
Bob?
Robert Smith, Cab. What about the pollination program that SRL was talking about?
Okay, we that may be very timely to present an update based on an assessment that I was just participating on, an assessment team that was looking at some possible pollinator initiatives. We haven't finalized yet, so I'm not going to go any further into that, but it may be very timely to do an update on that. So.
Thank you.
It's upside down. I'm sorry. You know, I just want to, as we're talking about this and we're moving forward, I know we're going to have 2 new chairs, committee chairs next year, and I just want to kind of follow up on what James was saying. When we go back and we look and we get down to the basics and we go back and we look at the mission of the CAB, is, you know, one of the things is to provide advice and recommendations to DOE and when they ask for it. This is things that, you know, the point of contacts are coming and saying these are things we want to know about. So, you know, each committee, we're going to meet next month. Each committee chair and vice chair are going to decide what your work plan is going to be. But as we sit here as a CAB and listen to each one, and I mean, I guess I'm talking right now, Joyce, because this is going to be you, is, you know, these are the things that DOE is asking to present to us so we can turn around and give them our recommendation on. So there's going to be more things. I loved how, Avery, you said there's a placeholder. And there's going to be more things to talk about, but I really want to pay attention to what they're asking. And I think we're asking some good questions about the pollination, and, you know, but I really, out of the whole thing, is I looked at the agenda, you know, I don't want to just say this is the last agenda topic. Let's really focus in here and see what DOE wants to hear from us next year. So just wanted to follow up, James. Thanks, man.
You're welcome. Susan.
Susan Corbett, Cab. What about what we want to know, Gil? Do we get to ask that too?
Yes, that's what the placeholder's for.
Ah, okay.
That's what Avery, yeah, that's what Avery was saying. We have a placeholder.
I understand.
So when Joyce sits down next month at the meeting with Avery, and they'll discuss the work plan and they'll put it together. And so I'm guessing Joyce is probably listening to Bob right now and saying, okay, we want to put in the pollination, but that's so. Avery's obviously already thought about what we want to put into it too, but we definitely want to respect DOE's request too. I mean, very much so.
And also, I'm here all day, so if you want to slip me any recommendations or suggestions, or email or James or whatever. So
we've heard a lot in the past about trichloroethylene and other solvents in the. I would think we'd want updates on those.
As far as specific remediation projects,
yeah.
Or the
we've heard about them in the past. I guess we want to see how productive they're being, okay, and how much cleanup has been done on those.
Joyce and I can figure out the best way to incorporate that. Thank you.
Thank you.
All right.
Anything
else for FDSR?
Okay. Thank you.
Seeing none. Thank you, Avery. Okay. And then up next, we have Maxine, who's going to talk about the nuclear materials topics.
Thank you. So I'm Maxine Maxted. I'm the nuclear materials liaison for DOE. And I'm just going to give you our presentation of our topics. It's going to look a lot like Avery's. So again, you've seen this slide from the earlier presentation. These are the facilities we're responsible for under nuclear materials. Again, we're required to put this in all of our presentations so that you guys get to see which facilities we're really talking about and how they interact with the other facilities on site. So basically what we completed in 2017 was an overview of the spent fuel program, an overview of our plutonium storage program, and our 235F deactivation update. So what we're proposing for 2018 is basically a programmatic view of spent nuclear fuel so that you can look at what we're doing and what our plan is and give us feedback on if you think it's the right approach to take and the right schedule to do, so you get that input into our program. And then the same thing again would be done for plutonium, based on what we have on site and the plan forward and the schedule and that whole approach. And then one of your recommendations, I think it was 334, required a presentation after all of the investigation was done on the HB line event. That's coming to closure this year, so we should be able to give that presentation sometime during the year. So that's what this last recommendation is here. And that was the HB line incident that happened in 2015. And then we have the placeholder again for the topics that you want to hear about. So again, our path forward is the same. We'll agree on what topics, we'll figure out how to schedule them and put them in the plan. We'll get that plan approved, and then we'll work to that plan. Any questions?
So, Narendra?
I think for next year, I'd like to see that, like to know more about Price Henderson and violations.
Okay.
And secondly, we never hear anything. I've been here 1 year. Haven't heard anything about quality assurance, especially NQA1 application.
Okay, we'll figure out which committee that should go under.
Thank you.
Dawn.
Dawn Gillis-Cab. Under PU disposition, it's not just an update of the blend down, but update to include other possible disposition options, because if it's all just going to be blended and shipped to WIP, that will take decades. Of course, any disposition of plutonium is going to take decades, but
We'll present what the department is proposing, and then you can comment on if you think that's adequate or not.
okay.
Susan, is that yours?
That is. Okay. Susan Corbett, Cab. Can we get a presentation on the environmental impacts of the tritium facility?
That's not an EM facility, so it's really not in our purview.
But I mean, it does have an environmental impact, doesn't it? It has releases, so shouldn't that be part of our?
It's still an NNSA program, so we don't have I don't have any contact with the tritium folks or their NNSA program.
So,
but I think when they do the site environmental report, it covers all the facilities on SRS. So you're getting that information. It's just in the whole site report.
But I don't get to ask questions about it, do we?
It's an NNSA program, and that's not the focus of the
so
EM.
this is Michael
I'm not talking about the
DOE.
program. I'm talking about the environmental impacts of it, of the releases.
This board is not. It's out of your purview to go and start asking questions into the information that's in the environmental annual report. Sure, but when you get into if the CAB wants to go question and probe deeper into the NNSA mission, that's not in the scope of this advisory panel.
I'm not talking about the mission. I'm talking about the environmental releases from that. So will that information be in the environmental impact report?
The environmental releases and impacts are always in the annual report for NNSA facilities.
So can we ask questions about those that are in the report?
We won't be able to answer them because NNSA does not come and present to this panel because the NNSA is not asking for advice from the panel. EM is asking for it. So their facilities are part of their mission. It's not in the purview.
Do they have any kind of an advisory, a CAB of any kind?
No, ma'am, they do not.
They do not. That's interesting.
Dawn, you got more?
Dawn Gillis-Cab, one more. 235F deactivation update. That was on
can be
17.
One that you could propose. Yes, we can certainly look at that.
To add that to 18.
Yes, ma'am.
Okay. Anything else from Maxine? All right, let's go. Zach, you.
Good way to start out right there. So my name is Zach Todd. I am your strategic and legacy management point of contact, and you're going to start seeing a pattern here as far as our briefs. So these are the topics for the Citizens Advisory Board consideration for the Strategic and Legacy Management Committee. So the purpose, very much the same. It's just to provide the potential topics for the Strategic and Legacy Management. And again, I know it's been said several times, but these are our proposed. These were some things that we think are important, and we do solicit and go through or make your inputs priority. So this is just kind of a rundown of what we did this past year, and I think I have it chronological order. So just kind of a mental note, these are the things that you've done in the past year when you're looking at some of these proposed items. So upcoming for the DOE proposed topics, I'm going to go ahead and say it right out the bat. It was a mistake on my part. The EM performance metrics are supposed to be on there, the proposed topic. That was just a mistake on my part. Maybe subconsciously, I don't know, but it's definitely supposed to be on the proposed topics for consideration. That's something that definitely, it brought a lot of energy and a lot of good questions and a lot of discussion, and I know there's been some letters back and forth, and even for the work plan, or the work plan committee, or the work day coming up, it's supposed to be discussed there as well. So some other ones, the budget process and update. Budget is such a big piece in the COG. It's important to understand how that process works and then all the potential effects of that with the updates. The integrated priority list, again, it's just such a big, important piece of the COG, and you guys y'all got a taste today of exactly the impacts of some of the things that the IPL can happen, or that happen with the IPL. Some historical ones that we normally do. We do the National Lab annual update. We do the historic preservation. And then we do the recruitment and retention ones. I know a couple years ago that one kind of came up. There was a real big concern as far as the future of the workforce at Savannah Riverside, and we've been providing annual updates since. So, and then there's your holder right there for the CAB proposed topics that we'll get your feedback and we'll discuss at the working group meeting. So path forward, again, much the same as the other ones. So with that, is there any questions?
Susan?
Oh, sorry.
Hey.
No one has anything for you right now, but that's okay. No, oh, Bob again.
Bob Doerr, CAB. Todd, Zachary, Todd, thanks again for working over the years together to put together the work plan for the Strategic and Legacy Management Committee. You've done a wonderful job. I'm going to just bring up this point again. This committee is a cross-cutting committee. In its purpose, it talks about cross-cutting the other issue-based committees. So I'm just going to go back to this morning with Dr. Gene Rhodes, and we heard about the ecology lab and what it does. And Dr. Rhodes talked about the funding for the lab. And I said something about, well, the funding for the lab, you weren't getting any increased funding, but it flows through PBSs. And then our offline, our DDFO, Mike McElhaney, pointed out to me very clearly that actually it's the lab receives grants, if I'm saying it correctly. They get grants from SRS for their funding, and the primary source of their funding is, in fact, these grants that they're getting from SRS, in addition to University of Georgia funding, and then they get other entities within the government provide money. So I'm just wondering, of a work plan, something that's a little out of the box maybe, would be to include a funding presentation within Strategic and Legacy Management, a funding presentation for the ecology lab, where they're getting their money from. If Dr. Rhodes went into some specifics in regards to the funding that the lab gets, the ecology lab gets, then maybe a recommendation could be made from that presentation to increase the funding for the lab, because I think a lot of people on this CAB committee are interested in seeing the lab be successful, and it does a great job in preserving the environment for the Aiken community. So it's just something to think about. It could be done back through facilities disposition and site remediation. It could be done that way as well. But this one was more of a financial issue, Zach. So, it's just something to throw out there. And the next, when the work plan is developed in February, that might be something you'd want to consider. Thank you.
Dawn Gillis Cab, two things. I'm assuming all the pension issues thing will be taken care of through Tom's ad hoc group, okay? And then the other thing is I think the CRO should still get an update on CRO, Community Reuse Organization, to add that to I personally think that's an important topic for our community.
Yeah, so without a doubt, we can put that in. We can work that with the new chair. Budget, pension, it's always going to have an effect. I think the special committee is a little bit more focused in its nature with the pension, but you're still going to see huge overlaying issues or overarching issues that affect the budget, the IPL with the pension. So it'll be brought up, just maybe not in the detail as the special committee.
Dave?
Dave Vavakis, CAB, just continuing what Bob had just said about the ecology lab. I think the same holds true for SRNL also, that they're supported by grants and contracts, and they don't receive any direct appropriations. So.
Thank you, Larry Powell, CAB. I don't know if this fits in with this committee or not, but I don't know how it fits in with any committee, but I think it would be interesting for DOE to give us some feedback to CAB as to the recommendations that they felt are the most important recommendations that we have brought forth to DOE, and how those recommendations impacted their decisions on certain topics.
Yeah, I think we would have to find a home for that, but I think that's a pretty fair question. I don't know if it'll be the legacy and strategic management, but that's something we can look at.
Thank you.
And everybody, if we did something like that.
Yeah. That's
Yeah, DOE McElwain speaking. James, let's go ahead and
Yeah.
I think that would be a good topic to put. Doesn't matter which one it falls under, but it really lines up well with what Earl did at the Chairs Committee meeting, where really he helped build he made a presentation that sets some initial expectations for what does and does not make a good recommendation. So I think that builds on the work that Earl did as the chair. As the vice chair for that meeting.
Any others? All right.
Thank you.
Thank you. All right. And lastly, only because of alphabetical order, we have waste management. Sonny's going to come up and give you the topics for that.
Good afternoon. My name is Sonny Blanco. I'm the point of contact for the Waste Management Committee. And we had a busy year. You had a presentation this morning that gave like a wrap up for what went on during the year, where we are right now. And definitely we had a lot of topics this year because we had this year, long time coming. We have been planning so hard and so long to prepare for operations of the SWPF. And as you know, we did a lot of work integrating and preparing the facilities to integrate with or have the solid waste processing facility integrated into the system. And then we had to replace the melter also. So that was great timing, though, because it's going to avoid outages of that kind in the near future. So following that into this year, in FY18, it's going to be a key year for us. So I figure that definitely have to propose to you to follow up on several of the items. First of all, as you know, we are supposed to have a new liquid waste contract. So when the time is right, we are proposing to have you look at the proposal that was the winning proposal, and give the opportunity to for you to know what our expectations in their baseline is, and for the new contractor, and have the new contractor be able to introduce themselves and provide to you their philosophy as a company that is going to be managing the operations for liquid waste and actually executing the mission. Also, We're proposing to provide to you information on what the facilities are going to be doing during the year as the time is right, and also give you an opportunity to see what's going on with the demonstration of the tank closure cesium removal, and actually completing the tank bulk waste removal efforts from Tank 10, which is a regulatory commitment. Also, we'll close out on the status of the 3H evaporator. Hopefully, we'll be able to put that to rest. And also the last phase of the evaluation, long-term evaluation for the mercury in liquid waste. We're also excited about a couple of other things. And this is an opportunity that we would like you to have to give us what you think about the 45-day review. You had a briefing this year about it. This is something, an initiative from EM1 to take a look at what is going on in the EM DOE complex-wide and try to figure out if priorities can be set to focus on those priorities and have the funding available to be able to finish some of those activities. And definitely liquid waste is one that is in the short list. We'll see what happens with that, but when the timing is right, I think it would be great to give you an update on that and give you an opportunity for you to tell us what you have, what you think about the ideas that we're presenting. Then for the FY19 budget, as John Lopez pointed out earlier, that one is still something that we are waiting for the president's budget, but we definitely want to talk about it after the president's budget is published, because we have a lot of ideas and a lot of activities. It's a big year, you know, as solid waste processing facilities should be operating, and we're moving forward with what we have been planning for so long, and trying to move forward with the liquid waste system the way it's supposed to be. We're poised for operations, full operations. So FY19 budget is very important to us. We have also the solid waste, which we cannot forget. And definitely we're talking about, we're proposing to talk about the True Waste program. It should be a big year in terms of shipments to WIP, and we definitely offer to you to talk about that. And last but not least, and it was no more space, but we do accept any topics that you may propose. If you want to not do any of those or change them, we're open for suggestions. And that's what we are proposing today. So any questions?
Let's see. Susan, is that your card?
That's me.
Oh, Mr. Malik. Sorry.
Narendra Malik, CAB. I know I've been here 1 year. We've been hearing a lot about true waste, but I haven't heard anything about the hazardous and mixed waste, their generation and disposal, and the regulatory applications. I'd like to see if there are any violations and for the next year.
Okay.
Thank you.
No problem with that.
Don?
Dawn Gillis, CAB. For some reason, I got a lot to say today. One thing I don't see on your 2018, I don't think it's a full presentation, but just making sure that you keep us up to date on the glass waste storage status and how that's going.
Sure.
And maybe just in your DWPF operations, just make sure that's covered. I don't see it as a separate. The other thing is under the True Waste program, to make sure that the categories are covered. Is it legacy? Is it newly generated? Is it PU? And just to make sure that all of that is covered under that. So it's not another topic, but just make sure that's covered.
Sure.
Okay, thank you.
No problem.
Now, Susan.
This Susan Corbett, CAB. I think this year we had a presentation on low-level waste disposition. I think it would be good to have another one on that. I think it's always interesting to see how it's being managed, what's going in there, what are the different low-level waste streams, and how they're being managed.
Okay. Are you talking about saltstone, the low-level waste under liquid waste?
Whatever's being buried.
Or solid?
Buried, the buried waste.
Okay, the solid waste.
The solid low-level waste, yes.
Yes, okay, no problem.
Thank you.
Okay. Any others for waste management? Outstanding. Thank you, Sonny. Like I said, that was not your last opportunity. If you think of something over the coming days, please let us or the appointed chairs for each committee know. No thing is too trivial for us to at least talk about and bring up. So if it's the slightest little thing that you think might even be a sub-presentation, please let us know. And that way the chairs can talk about it in a couple weeks. Okay? Up next, I believe we have time for a public comment setup. We're not originally scheduled until 3:30, but we should probably do one before we do any voting for the day. No one has signed up for public comments yet again, but I have to ask. If you'll start handing out the clickers, please. Does anybody want to make a public comment? No? None at all? All right. Bear with us with just a moment as we get the clickers passed out, and we'll start moving into voting for the afternoon. How's that sound? Yay. All right. Thank you. What's that? Yeah, is anybody curious how the election came out? I am. You want to know? Yep. Okay, well, Miss Eleanor, you'll be responsible for A&O again this year. Everybody congratulate Eleanor. Joyce, I'm sorry, you did become a chair for Deputy NSR. Larry retains the title for nuclear materials. Dawn, you have moved on to waste management. And everyone congratulate Dan Kaminsky for strategic and legacy management. All right. So y'all have an exciting year. Go ahead and pull out your day planners before we leave today. Make sure that you put in February 12th as your work plan date. Be thinking about who you want to be a vice chair for your committee. As we talked about yesterday, vice chairs are appointed by the committee chairs. So if you have somebody in mind, feel free to go ahead and ask them today. If not, ask them tomorrow, next couple of days. Let us know so that we can get them invited. Let them know that you want them as their vice chair, and we can keep going. And if, like we talked about, if you want to be a vice chair, let the person know. Don't keep it a secret. Don't be shy, okay? All right. With that, are we ready to move into voting? Chelsea's ready to move into voting. Nina, are you ready to move into voting? Nina's ready to move into voting. So let's start with...
Are we going to start with 338?
What's the first one that you have, 338?
Yeah, I didn't know if we were going to do it based on...
We didn't load them in order, so we're going to do a 338, and then we're going to back up to 334.
So we're going to start with recommendation 338. And again, these were the four that we talked about yesterday as far as closing them out. These are all recommendations that have had responses. So do we have a motion to close 338?
So a motion that we close.
No, I can't. I have to have them pulled up, and then I can tell you what they are. So my battery is about dead. Unless, Earl, you can pull them up on your
I'm
phone.
doing it for you. While she finishes pulling up the voting.
I normally have my binder on with all of that, or I have it on my phone, but my battery. Yeah, he's pulling it up.
All right, 338 is the revision of the SRS Community Involvement Plan. Can you pull it up?
So moved.
So we have a motion, and we have a second from Earl. So all those in favor of closing it, just press 1. Not closing it 2, and then of course abstaining is 3. Is that how many people we have?
Nope, you got a few more.
Nope. Just number 17.
Oh, they left.
Oh.
Or stepped out. He stepped out for a moment?
Okay.
All right.
So I think we have a majority with that. So if everyone's comfortable with it, we're going to go ahead and close 338.
Well, let's actually see what the results say.
Oh,
That just says who
doesn't.
voted.
Oh, that's right. I'm sorry. I keep thinking
Yeah.
if it's green, it goes with yes because it's green on
That's
your clicker.
for the
Yeah.
draft.
See, it actually makes sense in my son.
So now it's unanimous.
Yeah. Good. Well, that saved me some public embarrassment. All right. Moving along to 334. James, do you want to pull that one up?
I will.
I wanna
334
see the
was the
drones.
nuclear materials operations review.
That's right.
Nuclear materials operations review. That one was passed in May of 2016.
I move to close it.
Okay. Do we have a we have a second? All right. So again, all those in favor of your vote, please indicate. Narrator, since you got back, do you want to go ahead and vote your number? Well, I guess I don't want to call out your number officially, but you
We
can
all
just.
now know when Narendra votes.
All right.
All right. So has everybody voted? All right.
That sounds great.
And that one passes unanimously.
Perfect. Moving on to the third is 348. And James, do you want to pull that one up about what 348
Sure.
is? And Susan brought up a good point. You know, just because these recommendations are closed doesn't mean that you can't review them in the future and see if there's something pertinent, again, about opening it and rewriting it into a more updated recommendation. Miranda has closed
So
his already.
348, H Canyon is SRS spent nuclear fuel program.
Okay. Do we have a motion to close that recommendation? Kathy, do we have a second? Okay. All right, again, all those in favor?
Okay.
Perfect. So 20.
And
20.
that's everybody?
Yep.
All
And
right.
then finally, the fourth recommendation.
Close it? There we go.
See, I just go based on that number that's in the circle.
No, that's just the number of people that have voted.
I gotta stop that. All right, I don't like this. All right, so the
All right,
last one is
349.
349.
And that one was the opposed consolidation of interim storage of spent nuclear fuel and high-level waste at SRS.
Okay, is there any discussion on that recommendation?
The opposed consolidated interim storage of spent nuclear fuel and high-level waste at SRS.
All right, is there a motion to close that? Motion to close, okay. And then is there a second? All right, all those in favor, please indicate.
All right, everybody's happy with their votes? We'll close the vote.
Good.
Ooh, a little dissension, but that's okay.
Good. All right, thank y'all. So moving into the next piece is the draft recommendation. I know Gil discussed this one yesterday, and we had the discussion on it. We had a chance for public comment on it. So would anyone like to make a motion to accept? Okay, Gil makes the motion. Is there a second? All right, so going ready to take a vote. Yes, if you would like this motion to be passed and made into a recommendation. B, if you do not. And 3, if you abstain.
Okay, everybody's happy with their vote? You've selected? Go ahead and close it. And that passes with 95%.
Great,
Very
thank you
good,
so
everybody.
much.
That's awesome. Y'all did a lot of work today.
Mhm.
You passed 4 recommendations, or closed 4 recommendations. You passed another one. We've got that going to be going to DOE pretty soon. Nina, do you have any closing remarks before we ask Gil to come up and close out the meeting for us?
No, that is everything. Thank you.
No parting words? No words of wisdom?
You should always go out on a high note, so no.
Any closing remarks from anybody else? Any points that we need to make? Anything that we didn't cover today that we needed to cover? Gil, can I get you to come up and, as your first official ITIS chair, close this meeting? It is, isn't it? Just gavel us out. If you want to say anything, say stuff.
You are welcome. I don't think I've ever actually gavelled that thing.
So, in lieu of a long speech, meeting adjourned.
Awesome.